Oh, I love my final resource. It's God's Generals by Robert Slierdon.
Brilliant. Well, this one we were just talking before we hit record that this was on my dad's bookshelf as I was growing up, and I never picked it up to read it. So I'd love to hear about this book, and maybe I'm gonna have to find it from my dad's bookshelf.
Yeah, showing my age now, aren't I, Chris? So, yeah, God's Generals is just a really good book. There's a title on the front that says why they succeeded and why some failed. And the reason why I love this book is that it reminds us that in all our frailty, in all our humanness, God chooses us. And if they can do it, if God can use them, then God can use us. And I think sometimes we can sort of live in the threshold of our sort of previous disappointments and previous happenings and previous experiences, but God actually gets us to raise our gaze and break through all of like that. And what this book gets us to do, if there is someone out there who just needs to hope again, dream again, build again, read God's Generals.
Great. Well, let's should we dive into some of the generals that are in the book?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Who's listed in there? Now, if I remember rightly from my dad's book collection, I think I remember Smith Wigglesworth being one of them. Am I correct?
Yeah, Smith Wigglesworth. I can't say his name. You said it much better than me. Smith Wigglesworth is in there, and but they also talk about Polly Wigglesworth, his wife. And he was. We always talk about Smith, don't we? About the miracles that he did. But there was actually a time for Smith where he was actually backslidden, and it was Polly that was preaching. And Polly got to challenge his husband about what he was doing with his life, and he came up completely back on fire. And Polly prayed for her husband Smith to be filled with the baptism of the Holy Spirit. And it was at that point that he saw amazing healings, and he traveled to different places and saw people getting healed through his faith. And he was he started off by sort of speaking about words of faith and commanding sickness to leave, and is probably one of the first people to do that in that time. So it's really encouraging, and talks about the importance of, when we're in marriage, the importance of just encouraging one another and being a bright light to one another.
Fantastic. I didn't realize that story about Polly Wigglesworth. So that's really great to hear, and a wonderful story. And my own church has a link back to Smith Wigglesworth, in that the person that founded our church in 1920 was at a Smith Wigglesworth event, and that was the kind of catalyst. And so always great to hear a story about Smith Wigglesworth, and I think that's a wonderful story. Are there any other generals that are listed on there? Anyone that you want to highlight that comes to mind?
Yeah, so Catherine Kuhlman, I guess for me, is just an amazing woman of faith, isn't she? But it also talks about how, she made some mistakes in her life. So she married the wrong person, or she felt she married the wrong person, and she made some difficult decisions in her ministry. And things don't always go right in ministry. We can be, really going for God and doing great things, but things don't always go right. Sometimes we make the wrong decisions. Some people, sometimes some people fall into sin, and it can affect ministry. It can affect things that we do. And yeah, but at the same time, Catherine Kuhlman, the numbers that you hear about of people filling filling the stadiums and experiencing the presence of God and the power of God and being healed by the power of God is just phenomenal. When she got right with God and got back on track. And it just shows us that everything is redeemable. Everyone is redeemable. It doesn't matter what we do, what mistakes we feel we've made. God can redeem everything.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think this is the thing that highlights something that I think in Christian leadership, it should be so countercultural to the rest of the world. In that, I was thinking through the Apostle Peter recently, and the Apostle Peter is obviously famous for denying Jesus. And Jesus said that, if you deny me, I'll deny you. And and then Peter goes and denies Jesus. And but what does Jesus do? He's full of grace and he restores. And I think in any other circle we'd be saying, Peter should resign. That's it. He's done. That's a stunning denial. There's a lack of trust that you'd think would be there. But Jesus does something that's completely different. And when we have these generals that you hear about, and you like you said, they're imperfect people, but God just has a completely different way of doing things, and he uses people's imperfection, and he can bring restoration to those places and still do incredible things through imperfect people. So I think it feels like there's a God's way of bringing through generals, and even when they fail and make mistakes, that God brings a wonderful restoration. So we can hear about these wonderful people that aren't perfect, and I think that's what becomes really quite exciting. So we can hear about them because it's exciting, because you don't have to be perfect to be used by God. You just got to be willing and have a heart after him. Well, I think we've probably got enough time to talk about one other person. Have you got is there another general that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, probably Amy Semple McPherson. She was a very bold lady, a young lady who basically had loads of questions about God, basically brought up in a Methodist church and had loads of questions about God. And I think what amazes me time and time again is the ability of God to just break through into people's lives. And just, she experienced the presence of God by looking up to God, up to the sky one night, and just being in awe of the moon and the stars. And she said, God, if you created this, then you created me, and your works are mighty, and you can do a mighty work through me. And that's how she got saved, and just that huge realization. And I think sometimes we can underestimate the power and the enormity and the almightiness of God to do that in our lives, but also then to carry us through. That she had an enormous ministry, but it was a ministry that was birthed and brought about on her knees. She would spend many hours, many days in prayer, and just doing mighty things at the hand of God. But she also wasn't perfect. She was described as being, really a good thing, strong in character, but could be a bit mouthy, could be a bit, but God's no respecter of persons. He is doing a mighty way, and again, filled many places and saw many healings and many people set free. So it's a real encourager that God is no respecter of persons, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And so great to hear that there's we can often think, if it's a book like God's Generals, it would all be just men in there, but there's loads of examples of amazing women that God has used as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are some at the Evan Roberts, the great Welsh revivalist, is in there. But I think what is amazing about this book is that sometimes when we watch YouTube clips and we can watch different things, we can just see the miracles, and we can just see the the fruit, and which is really awesome, and it encourages us. But it is also really encouraging to know, where did these people go wrong? What mistakes did they make? Where leaders coming up through now, where are some of the things that young leaders can go back and go, actually, I need to make that change, or I need to concentrate on my marriage, or I need to be spending time with God. Or it's those really little things. Yeah, they may have done great miracles, and that's really awe-inspiring, but I think there are simple lessons, coming back to that whole theme that we've been talking about today, about the little things, the little changes that I can make, so that there is a great yielding of fruit and in my life.